Happy's Humble Burger Farm might seem like just a goofy work away from work game, but underneath the cooking premise hides a deeper world of jump scares and a malevolent heifer. With the release of Scythe Studios' new game, Burgatory, on the horizon next week, I wanted to cover everything you needed to know before the co-op flipping commences. So, while I was working on this video, they said on Reddit that the Burgatory name actually had to be dropped for copyright reasons. Apparently, there's a real restaurant that uses that name. Anyway, it's now called Happy's Humble Burger Cult. So just remember that. If you didn't know, Happy's Humble Burger Farm is a horror game where you work as an employee of Happy's doing fast food work. You basically spend your days clocking in at work and trying not to mess up while looking for a way to escape the mysterious New Elysian City. If you make too many mistakes during your shift, it can cause an evil version of Happy to appear and punish you for ruining the company's name. That's basically the initial premise of the game, but let me set up what you need to know about the wider universe before we get too far into the events of the game. This is really meant to just give you a premise of the lore. There's a lot of it, so this should just give you enough background to know what to look for in the new game. But let's get into it. Thus far, all of the Scythe team games take place within the same universe, but the main ones that we're going to be looking at for this game is going to be Happy's Humble Burger Farm and Happy's Humble Burger Barn. Some of the lore and various information can be found on tons of platforms, such as AMAs, Bandcamp song descriptions, wikis, and other YouTube videos, so definitely be ready. A lot of the information isn't even in any of those, but it's uploaded directly by the devs to Discord or Wiki. So, the Scythe Universe takes place in an alternate version of our solar system. It features 8 unique planets with multiple ones having life on them. So far, most of the games have taken place on planet Scythe, which is the second planet from the sun. A few of them have taken place elsewhere, but we won't touch on those. Happy's Humble Burger Farm takes place on the planet Scythe in New Elysian City. That pretty much describes the general overall world setting, so let's dive into some of the early timeline for Happy's and the Barnyard Buds. For their universe, the timeline is generally described as BGW or AGW, meaning before the Great War or after the Great War. This refers to the Great Scythian War, which was a major conflict between the various continents on planet Scythe. It was about 5 years long, and we don't know what caused it. All we really know is that it ended with the nations exchanging nuclear payloads, causing millions to die. This is important because it allows us to frame the calendar for our world and get some dates on things. And it inspired one veteran, Tex Vanover, to create farmyard festivities just 1 year after the war, or 1 AGW. Also, the 1 year AGW is when the show piloted. It was probably created before that. The show is essentially an old black and white show, similar to Steamboat Willie, that features a bunch of animals on a farm trying to not get butchered by the farmer. At the same time, a burger's place called Happy's opened in 3 BGW and started serving former soldiers of the war. I think unintentionally Tex also created a character named Happy, who was fully known as Happy the Humble Heifer. Audiences dubbed her as a fan favorite and the main character of farmyard festivities. It could have been inspired by the restaurant, but just to be clear, the restaurant is described as having started when Tex was only 15. So, Tex also created several other characters such as Petey the Portly Pig, Charlie the Chillin' Chicken, Solomon the Standoffish Salmon, aka renamed into Sammy the Surly Salmon, and the Farmer, who's the main antagonist of the series. All of these characters are going to appear in the main game. The next major event was in 52 AGW when Zane Grimm was born. He would become a very important character around the companies and the ideologies explored in the world. He's mainly known as the character who would become the CEO of Paragon and for his ecliptic prophecy, which was a theory that humanity started on the planet Carthank and suffered an extinction event. It also included a theory that when a conjunction of the planets occurred, planet Scythe would also suffer an extinction event. This was mostly rejected at the time, and in 75 AGW it caused him to be ostracized from scientific communities. The same year, he decided to build the Outcast Island outpost on Durijongo, which I think is in the Outcast Islands due to the name. It'll be south of Sabbat, the central continent. Just to be clear, we don't know the layout of the continents, it's just the main continent talked about in the games. Simultaneous to this, Tex Vaniver and the farmyard festivities ended, which led to him passing the company to his son Chuck in 35 AGW. Chuck sought to reboot various aspects around his father's invention, so he created a new show titled Happy the Humble Heifer in 67 AGW. I'm not certain, but it implies that there's only one season of the show due to the studio suffering a catastrophic fire. However, the series as a whole saw some great success because in 71 AGW, Happy's Hamburger and Happy's Humble franchises merged into Happy's Humble Hamburger. Which, by the way, we never see a restaurant version of the Happy's Humble Hamburger. The final rebranding was in 100 AGW when they fully rebranded into the titular Happy's Humble Burger Farm. Checking back in with Zane Grimm shows us he discontinued his research into the ecliptic prophecy after the death of his daughter in 79 AGW. This led to him to attempt to cure death, according to the timeline. We don't hear much else from him until 88 AGW, when he announced the launch of Paragon Incorporated after leaving his title as senator. There was also another major company that had some importance to us, known as Obscura Programming, who started as a media company but got into other fields. I just wanted to mention them, but we'll touch on them later. It's speculated that due to Grimm losing his daughter, he became fascinated with human experimentation and focused on organizing humanity into a single union. He started a plan known as the United Front, which basically seeks to unite all the various nations into one united Scythian government. To start achieving these goals, he used Paragon to develop dangerous research projects using the island outpost he constructed years ago in Durijongo. They were especially interested in brain and mind control projects. Unfortunately, some event led to Paragon being bought out by Obscura Biotech, and the United Scythian government formed. We'll touch on that later, but that should be all the background information you need to get into the events of Happy's Humble Burger Farm. So, Happy's Humble Burger Farm opens with a cutscene of two doctors over you. They seem to be chatting about some reality fabrication chip created by Obscura. They note they're meant for mind control before we fade away into the simulation. Then, after a short tutorial, you awaken in your apartment in New Elysian. You grab a beeping communicator on the counter and now you can hear your manager. And he can check in on you. He can't hear you though. He basically just tells you need to head to Happy's Humble Burger Barn to clock in for your first shift. Once here, this starts the primary loop of the game. We come to work, we make some money, we learn what we can, and we find various cassette tapes and posters that can kind of tell us some of the lore. For example, there's an entity known as Asset Joy, basically the evil version of Happy, that will require you to work and will punish you for making mistakes. Throughout the story, we discover an asset version for each character from the original Farm Lane festivities. However, nothing changes until the third day, when the construction site opens up in town. This allows us to explore inside and discover a sleeping asset Peter. He is a crazy obese version of the pig mascot from the original version, and upon defeating him, of course, by making him 3 burgers, we crawl through his burst belly to discover a tiny lab. The scientists of the lab seem to have been studying Asset Peter, but they suffered heavy casualties from Peter's rampage, which only ended because he gained so much weight that he fused with the floor. This inspires the scientists on the cassette tape to punish Paragon somehow. More importantly, though, at the time we find a floppy disk that gives us the ability to craft a keypad hacker. It can't be used until you get back to your apartment, and you discover someone talking in the walls. Once you crawl through a cracked hole, you find a secret room in the back of your apartment. It has a talking head known as Vic, or Virtual Intelligence Cybernetic. Vic is a hacked AI unit similar to the ones you see walking around or coming to buy burgers. He's able to tell you a lot about what's going on and informs us about someone named E7. E7 was the playable character from the original game Happy's Humble Burger Barn. So this game is a direct sequel. He also gives you access to the Obscura Fabricator, which allows you to craft items you need for breaking out of the simulation. It's basically an easy bake oven. Using the keypad in various locations allows us to learn about our neighbor and coworker, Toe, who is stuck in the simulation. His name was Theodore, but he was in the simulation so long the brain chip fried his brain. We also learn about a scientist named Dr. Rochelle Luna, or E14, who was in the simulation, living next door, but she had no mind control, so it allowed her to study the effects on Toe and E7. She originally came in to test efficacy, however, she really was testing for ethics, and she finds it extremely negative and ethically bad. Lastly, we find a keypad in Happy's that allows us to enter a hole in the floor, where we learn that the customers are actually robots created. We also find a secret room used by E7. We learn that they are trafficking people from the King's Comfort Resort on Durijango to brainwash and experiment on them because they're easier to work with than the natives. Then, we get a floppy disk allowing us to create a burger bomb. This will allow us to access more new areas. The first one is in Happy's itself. There's a hole in the floor that when you bust it open, shows a dilapidated version of Happy's below the news store. However, it looks like the one from the original Burger Barn, so it's an old version of Happy's. The most notable information down here is on a cassette tape confirming that Paragon captured E7 after he escaped Burger Barn originally. This means Paragon and Obscura are essentially the same company despite public perception thinking them different. Nothing much else happens until the New Elysian Museum opens and you can explore inside. In the museum, we learn a lot about the further history of farmyard festivities and how Chuck Vanover and the Vanover twins took the series following their grandpa's retirement. We also learn a ton about the Scythian solar system from the theater. It gives us little tidbits about each planet. Currently, they say planet Scythe is the only planet with organic life, but we know that to not be true according to extended universe info. It's implying that the world Scythian government is controlling information. Notably, all the information about Lay, the fourth planet, is scrubbed. And Dalvicate is mentioned to be a giant space station. This would imply that previous intelligent life was far more technologically advanced than we know of, but there's almost no information about it anywhere yet. One of the cassette tapes in the museum tells us that Grimm suspected the assets were intelligent organisms that intentionally chose to take over nightmare versions of the Barnyard Bud animatronics. They did this because they look scarier and they can inspire fear in their prey. This is the first inkling into what the actual monsters are. They are described as some kind of primordial parasite that infected the animatronics for unknown reasons. We also learned that Acid Joy was first discovered sometime after Durijango received a nuclear strike. It is implied that they used the nuclear strike to destroy the assets or hide them, but all it did was make them mad. Using a burger bomb in the museum, we discover a trash area where Asset Chuck is roaming around, an animatronic of Charlie the Chillin' Chicken. While exploring further down into the facility, we discover that Grimm wanted to keep the assets to research them. However, they kept proving to be increasingly dangerous. Once we get to the bottom of the area, which looks a lot like a volcano, we are able to start the Asset Chuck boss fight. It's basically just a big area we can explore and make burgers for him. But we learn a lot about Obscura and the facility during our fight. Most importantly, we learn about a Zappy helmet blueprint that fries the chip in your head, allowing you to escape the simulation. After using the Obscura incinerator to fry up some chicken, we can enter an emergency exit that takes us to a sort of break room. Inside, we get some of our biggest finds. We find the Zappy helmet floppy disk and tons of lore information. Mainly that the scientists of Paragon and Obscura started to turn on Grimm, but it was too late. When he dropped a nuclear strike, it was shown that he did that to trap the assets in the facility and hide all the evidence of his crimes. He also managed to coerce the nations of the world to combine into a single world government that he could control. It was almost like all of his dominoes fell into place at the same time. It was implied that the nuclear strike was hidden inside a suitcase from one of the notes, allowing him to discreetly and precisely strike a certain part of the facility. With all that discovered, though, we can leave, but the only way out of the break room is by jumping into a hole at the bottom. At the bottom, we fall into water and enter the lair of Asset Samuel, basically just Sammy the fish. After a quick escape, we emerge back into New Elysian on fire. The simulation seems to be failing and the world is glitching. Vic tells us to hurry and construct the Zappy helmet, but before that, we can explore the nearby radio station for information about someone named Maverick Cooper. He was a reporter trying to blow the whistle on Obscura by exposing their crimes. He was lured to Durijongo by being offered a position at Obscura to come interview them and work for them for a year, but being unable to publish his private interviews, technically. I don't know how he thought that was a good idea, but anyway, when he arrived, he got put into a simulation similar to Toe and ourselves. Luckily, he was able to hide 2 of his interviews in the deck from Gregory Theodore Reynolds and Vivian Johansson. Gregory is listed as the co-founder of Obscura, and Vivian Johansson was a director of behavioral sciences at QuickCure. These tell us that Obscura hid its nuclear strike by calling it a nuclear meltdown. We can get tons of information from these, mainly letting us know that Gregory is the co-founder, and the other being, most likely, Zane Grimm for Obscura. We also get a picture of Obscura's main objective. Their main objective is about creating control for the upper class. We also learn that QuickCure is owned by Obscura, so we can assume a lot of the major companies on the planet are in some way connected to Obscura, and, by extension, Paragon. Vivian shares that they hide behind shell companies, which are considered legally distinct despite working together so closely. It essentially confirms that, in a way, Zane Grimm achieved his goal of control over Scythe in general. Nearing the end of the interview with Vivian Johansson, she becomes more robotic, maybe implying that she wasn't even a real person, and Maverick Cooper signs away his rights, unintentionally, to Obscura Biotech. They basically take him to the island and instantly put him into a reality fabrication program, where he thinks he's working as a TV host reporting on them, but he begins to lose himself, similar to Toe. Moving on, once we craft our Zappy helmet, we are transported back in time 5 years to ourselves before the simulation. We awaken in a hotel on Durijongo as a reporter named Ryder Heitzman, who was our MC. He was an associate or friend of Maverick Cooper, who was alerted to come to the island following his disappearance. Some information on the walls tells us that the natives do not like Paragon on their island, and we learned that there is a large majority of resort guests and natives disappearing. We also learned that a lot of the scientists working for them are speculated to be war criminals from Dariaz, who fled during the Great Scythian War. Unfortunately for Ryder, while he was here, the nuclear strike hit the island. Being forced to evacuate led to him entering the sewer system below, where he stumbled upon the underground version of the original Happies, the same one we saw earlier under our Happy Humble Burger Farm. As we go to escape, a Paragon security guard finds and captures us. Then we awaken in a haze of 2 doctors talking about us and noting how we are friends with Maverick. They then mention that Obscura is already working with Paragon, and we get assigned E42 and pushed into the simulation. As we awaken back into the present New Elysian City, Vic tells us he's powering off permanently. Now that we fried the chip, we are able to see more of reality. This leads to us finding a secret door at the underground Happies, leading into the sewer system from our flashback. Following it leads us to finding the original Happies restaurant in a noir-themed city. Presumably the first Happies from when they combined franchises. I don't think it's the OG one from before the war, because it looks like 50s era. We work one more shift at this Happies before we get teleported to the bottom of a dump, with lava slowly rising. It seems the volcano of Durijongo that was powering a lot of Obscura's facilities is raising the lava levels. As we escape and finish our shift, we finally culminate the game with the boss fight against the Asset Farmer. We make him 3 burgers, then finally escape the simulation through the phone booth. we awaken in a torn-apart Obscura facility. Scientists are lying dead on the ground, and as we round the corner, a door is getting torn apart by Asset Joy attacking more scientists. It would appear that as we were escaping the simulation, the scientists were getting mauled by the real Asset Joy. Once the door is broken, though, she's nowhere to be found. So, we walk freely and finally leave the Obscura nightmare as we walk into the open area of Durrey-Jongo. As we climb up and away, we see the camera pan down, showing that Asset Joy also escaped the facility. She was using us as an escape route. And that concludes Happy's humble burger farm. Now, let's recap the lore so we know what to expect for Burger Cult. Essentially, on planet Scythe, there are 3 nations: Sabbat, Dariaz, Rablieg. For some reason, a huge great war started between the nations and ended with nuclear explosions. Millions died and a large portion of the planet was weary and tired. This inspired Tex Vaniver to make Farmyard Festivities, which features the main character of Happy the Humble Heifer and her friends. As the show finished up, he passed down the company to his son, Chuck Vaniver, who wanted to change things up, and later combined the company with Happy's Hamburgers, a restaurant founded before the war that helped with war relief efforts. Over time, at some point, the Vaniver twins took over and started doing their own take on the universe, but that's not super important yet. In the early AGW 50s, Zane Grimm is born, and wanted to be a scientist similar to his parents. After he received his doctoral degree in his studies, he theorized that the planet Carthink is where life originated and got wiped out due to a conjunction of the planets, causing a doomsday event. He suspects the planet Scythe is next. He called it his ecliptic theory. This caused him to become ostracized and left the scientific community. He eventually lost his infant daughter and began the 8X trials, which was basically just a group of trials of him attempting to use zombification to cure dying. The last trial being 8X18, which caused a chemical leak which likely shut down another major company known as Alcanan Industries. Zane Grimm eventually runs for mayor and senator of Donovan City under the name Dominic Jan, so he can make a difference. He actually improves the lives of a lot of people until he's exposed by Maverick Cooper, who actually agreed with his ecliptic theory. This exposure led to him stepping down and founding Paragon Inc. in 88 AGW. This could potentially give Grimm a small grudge towards him, despite him technically agreeing with his overall theory. Paragon opens its doors into scientific research on Durrey-Jongo, using Grimm's previously built facility. During this time, they developed the reality fabrication program and various other programs to research. They were researching how working can impact trauma and mind control, which led to the Happy's Bunch being involved. However, during their experimentation, they find living primordial organisms far underground that take over the Barnyard Bud's kaiju animatronics. They kidnap natives and King's Comfort resort guests in order to use them for nefarious purposes with their reality fabrication chips. During this time, he captures Toe, Maverick, E7, and various other people. Eventually, Ryder, E42, comes to investigate Maverick's disappearance, but is captured after the nuclear suitcase is detonated somewhere on the island. The detonation was originally intended to hide the primordial organisms after realizing they are extremely dangerous. However, it had the added effect of allowing him to convince the 3 nations to combine into one world Scythian government to deal with the nuclear fallout. He disguised it as a nuclear meltdown and got the political power he so desired. It is implied that he has ties to almost every major company on Scythe in some way, but we don't know to what end. This leads to the events of the game starting with you in the simulation, trying to escape and coming into contact with all the assets throughout the story. It all culminates with you escaping the simulation and the Obscura facility, followed closely by Asset Joy. Now, with all of that said, you should have a solid understanding of everything you need to begin Burger Cult. On the Reddit AMA, they confirmed it should have a much lighter story compared to Burger Farm. However, they said that lore hounds will be feasting. So, expect me to make a video about all the new Scythian lore at some point. It's a little bit hard to anticipate what we are going to see exactly in Burger Cult, but we can presume that there's some kind of cult worshipping Happy. I'm very curious what that implies, if it's Happy the animatronic or Happy the primordial organism. I'm also hoping for more information on the current timeline past 100 AGW and what Zane Grimm has been up to now that he has his one world government. He literally thinks he's Emu. Perhaps we can find out what Toe's employee number is. The devs implied that it was important. Or perhaps we can find out about the mystery surrounding Lei's demonic invasion and the current state of the spaceship planet Dalvicate. I would love to find out anything about the Wall of Rot or the other two continents that we almost know nothing about, but anyway, expect some answers next week when the game launches. Also, if anyone would be interested in my covering of all of the Scythian universe in greater detail, let me know. Supposedly there's 3 to 5 phases of lore they have planned, and we're still in the first phase, so there's going to be tons to talk about. This video was decently thorough, but there's definitely still tons of stuff I didn't mention or just kind of skimmed. And I wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Dirck. He has a fantastic video on the lore about Happy's and Northbury Grove, specifically, that helped me find a lot of sources that I didn't know where to look for. If you enjoyed this, you would certainly enjoy what he produced as well, so definitely check him out. Also, if any of the devs are watching and, I don't know, want me to throw a little voice on a cassette tape for Burger Cult, let me know. I'm just saying I'm free. Thanks for watching.